Hi everybody, my name is Jenny Savage and welcome to this insight into the teaching of Christian beliefs event, and thank you for joining us. So I thought I would just tell you a little bit about me, why I'm doing this event. I'm currently in my 17th year of teaching. It's been quite a long time now, and I've been a head of religion and worldviews for the last 7 years. I also mark and I'm a team leader for Pearson as well. So as Lana mentioned before, Peter is also here. So he will be monitoring the Q&A box. If you could refrain from putting questions in the chat box and put them in the Q&A box instead, that would just really, really help Peter to be able to see them, answer them, or collate them for later on, for us to be able to hopefully answer them when we can. Okay, so let's hope that this works. There we go. Fantastic. So that's the welcome and introductions done. So first of all, here's just a session agenda for today. I'll go through the aims and objectives. We're going to have a look at some different curriculum models or routes through the specification. The main thing that I want to be able to kind of give you today is the practical skills and strategies to design and deliver effective lessons. Having a look at the big picture, developing the schema and retrieval practice as well. I've got quite a few different activities that hopefully you can take away, and have a look at some relevant resources, and then hopefully have some time for discussion and Q&A as well. So first things first, our aims and events is what I'm hoping that you're going to get from this session. So hopefully this event will provide focused subject knowledge support for the beliefs and teaching section for Christianity area of study. So that's specifications A and B. Hopefully I'll give you some clarification on some specification content. We will have some time hopefully to discuss the planning of engaging lessons, using a variety of resources and activities, and have some opportunity for Q&A. Obviously, I've developed this. I've hopefully going to give you lots of different ideas that you can take away with you, but everyone's going to have their own ways of teaching it. If you've got a brilliant idea that you have been doing, please use the chat box for this function. It's brilliant when everyone can share their different ideas. So it is suitable for both new and experienced teachers who want to enhance their subject knowledge and their pedagogy as well. So during this event, what I'm hoping is that you are going to gain a deeper understanding of the specification for Christianity and its requirements. We're going to have a look at those practical skills and strategies to design and deliver these effective lessons that meet the needs of all learners, gain access to the relevant resources, and benefit from feedback and advice of subject specialists, which I think is me. For this now, I would like to just do a first poll if possible. So I'd just like to find out a little bit about where you're at in your teaching of this specification. That's not the poll that we wanted. I don't know if we can get another one up. I'm not in charge of the polls. That's not my thing. No. There we go. Okay, so question 1 and 2. So how long have you been delivering or teaching this qualification and subject? So are you new to the delivery? Have you been delivering it for 1 to 2 years or more than 2 years? And were your students entered for the last examination that we've all just got through? So I'll just give a couple of minutes just for you to enter that. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So we're quite equal actually between people who are new to delivery and then people who have been here for probably a long time like me, delivering it for more than 2 years. Like I said, hopefully what I'll do is give you some useful things that you can take away, whether you're new or you've been teaching this before. And actually we've got majority of people entered for the last examination series, and 5 people I think who are taking it in the next series. Okay, so again, hopefully that will you will get some interesting. I think I've just shared the results of that, so you can all just see where everyone's at. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of that now. Okie doke. So the first thing that I want to have a look at are different curriculum models. So I'm interested. I want another poll now. Sorry, I promise that there won't be one of these on every slide. Just to know how you actually deliver the specification model. So there's just personally, I teach it in the order of the specification. A way that I'm going to show you in a minute is teaching through the life of Jesus. I've just wondered if anyone did it any other way. If you could just answer that poll now just to see. Yeah, I thought this might be the case. Okay, so from what I'm seeing, we've got majority of people teach it in the order of the specification. I thought that might be the case. We have one person who teaches it another way. If you can just pop in the chat how you teach it, that'd be really interesting, I think, for people to see. This is something that, to be honest, before I was asked to write this training, I hadn't really thought about teaching it any other way. I only really thought about teaching it through the way the specification is written. However, I do know that there can be a bit of a criticism sometimes of just teaching to the test. So I thought this was quite an interesting way of doing it. So teaching it through the life of Jesus. So instead of kind of going into your lessons saying, right, okay, we're doing 1.1, we're doing 1.2, etc. Kind of going, right, well, actually, we're going to learn about the life of Jesus through this and teach it through that. So you can see here, this is just an example of something you might want to do. You might want to discuss with your teams. So actually starting with the birth of Jesus, talking about the birth of Jesus, and then looking at the incarnation. Through this, you can obviously look at the divine side of Jesus, but also the human side of Jesus, which can then lead you on through to the baptism of Jesus, which is obviously a great example of the Trinity. And then through the Trinity, you can have a look at the different roles of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit through creation. And then from the creation, we can go to the last days of Jesus's life, and then to salvation, atonement, and then life after death. So you're covering everything. It's not too much of a different way of doing it, but I suppose it's looking at it from a perspective of not just teaching to the exam, teaching it as more of a scheme of work, maybe called the life of Jesus, and then completing it through that, doing your exam questions through that. It's just one way that I thought of when I was asked to kind of have a think about this. Like I said, other people may teach it a different way, or you may just think, actually, I'm more than happy teaching it the way of the specification. But again, like I said, it's just something to think about. Peter, I just seen that you've raised
Just
a hand.
seen someone in the chat there has offered an alternative way that you might want to explore, Jenny, with the group.
Yeah, fantastic. Let's have a look at the chat. Let's see if I can get this off. So having extra time for delivery, wow, that sounds like a really lovely thing there. So Jodie's talked about having extra time for delivery, so starting by giving the context of Judaism, the Old Covenant and Small Testament studies, prophecies of the Messiah, etc., which builds a foundational knowledge of context prior to Jesus. Yeah, fantastic. If you do have that extra time, I'm not sure everybody will, but brilliant. I suppose as well that would work really, really well if your second religion that you were studying was Judaism as well. But yeah, I love that way. I think that would work really, really well. And I suppose this is something that you can think of for when you're developing your Key Stage 3 schemes of work. Maybe if you haven't got the extra time at Key Stage 4, maybe developing that earlier on so that then you can refer back to that and do that. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Jodie. It's really interesting. Okay, so practical skills and strategies. I think this is probably why everybody is here. So I just wanted to draw your attention to, first of all, to sections 1.6. Christian eschatology. So you'll notice that there is an asterisk next to this here. So in this section, students should compare and contrast beliefs about the afterlife with and their significance within Christianity with one of either Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, or Sikhism. So this is the part of the specification where there is that comparison with another religion, and it is only where there is an asterisk, so they will only be asked to compare at this point. So when I was thinking about, well, how do I teach this, something that I do is I tend to teach it through these exam questions, which you can find in the SAMs. So I tend to give them a sheet of A3 paper and get them to divide it in half. On one side, they write and draw the teachings in Christianity, and the other side, I'll get them to do the teachings of Islam, because this is the other religion that we study. Obviously, you can do that with any other religion that you study. So then what I do is I tend to get them to go through and highlight all those differences. So they've got it there, and then I will give them these exam questions. Now, I tend to recap this when we're teaching the Christianity, and then obviously when we're teaching the Islam as well, just so that they really kind of have that practice and they know that these questions can come up. So we've got these 2 4-mark questions here. Like I said, these can be found in the SAMs. So I do think at this point it's really, really important to note down that you may need to teach pupils what the main religious tradition of Great Britain is. So I find that when you talk about religious traditions with pupils, they don't always know what that is. So I've asked them before to outline different religious traditions, and I get the Eucharist, I get pilgrimage, and they'll talk about different traditions within religions. So it's not always a phrase that I think we use, and it's certainly not a phrase that a lot of our pupils maybe use or know. So if they get a question like to describe 2 differences between Islam and the main religious tradition of Great Britain, you will have some of them that will be absolutely stumped by that. So again, this is another opportunity that I use just to be able to kind of tell them that and know that these phrases could come up in the exam as well. Okay, so what you will notice as I go through this training is that I decided to take it from the specification focus. So what I've done is really, really use that specification focus to pick out exactly how I teach different parts of it. So before we start, what I tend to find with the Trinity is that there are massive debates on whether or not you should use analogies. So I'm just interested, and actually you might be happy to know this is going to be the last poll, but I'm just really interested to know if you do use analogies. So I know lots of people may use the H2O analogy, and there may be other analogies that you use. So first of all, I'm just interested to know if you think analogies are useful when teaching the Trinity, because I think there's a bit of a debate with this one. Whilst you do that, I'm just going to turn my light on. It's gone really dark here. Okay, I can see again. Okay, so majority of people have answered yes. That I'll just share those results, that they do find analogies useful when teaching the Trinity. We've got a few people saying no. Like I said, the reason that I've put this in here is because when I was thinking about this, I remember reading on, I think it was one of the social media platforms, a big debate about whether or not they're useful or not. And to be honest, I still don't know. I still don't know if they're useful. I find with some of my pupils that they are. I find with some of my pupils that they're absolutely not. So I tend not to use them. And I try and start my lesson focusing on the students understanding the key terms to start with. So I think the most logical place to start with this is by using the word Trinity. So there's a couple of ways that I teach key terms I'm going to show you now. So the first way, and I'm sure this isn't new to anyone, is by breaking down the word to help them understand it. So for tri, obviously meaning 3. Okay, and unity meaning joined as 1. Okay, which obviously means that 3 joined as 1. So you'll notice on many of the slides in this presentation, that I do a couple of things to help support lower ability pupils and stretch and challenge higher ability pupils on the same slide. So to help lower ability pupils, I tend to use dual coding a lot. You will notice that there will be lots of pictures on these slides. That's something that I tend to add in. Sorry, something's just popped up on my screen. Something that I try and add in, I just think it really helps pupils to visualize using diagrams. And then to stretch higher ability pupils, I use Bright Sparks activities. So as you can see here, I'm trying to challenge them to think about the Latin origins of the word, Trinity and Unity. So Trinus and Unus, meaning threefold and one. So this is something that I'm going to do quite a lot. You'll see this again throughout this training. And like I said, with analogies, sometimes I find, because I have used the H2O example before, and I find that it's really, really helpful with higher ability pupils. I find that actually it really isn't helpful with lower ability pupils. So I've had them in the past when they've written an answer say things like God is just like H2O, and they're kind of missing the point of it. So I think that for me, they can be really, really useful. In some ways they can't, but using something by just decoding that word and getting them to really understand that word, I find is a really, really good starting place. So at this point, I find that pupils are like, right, okay, I'm on board. The Trinity, it's 3 and 1. I know this new key term. I've got this. It's not actually as difficult as Miss was going on about. And then I show them this diagram and it absolutely blows their mind. So this is one where they go, oh, what? So the Father's not this, but Father's God, the Son's God, Holy Spirit's God. And this is where inevitably I tend to have the questions of, well, how can God speak to God if Jesus is God? And I say, right, okay. So then I tend to throw this in. So I think this is a really, really good quote to use for the Trinity. Now, I have to say this one isn't on the specification, so it's worth noting that this isn't a quote that is suggested on the specification. But I really like using this quote to try and stop those questions, if that makes sense. So what I tend to do, and this is another way that I teach key terms, you'll notice that the Bright Sparks activity is on there as well. So I will use the Freya model a lot. So at first, when the Freya model was introduced to me, I didn't really like the whole say it bit. I thought, it feels a bit strange. But then actually, when I walk past languages classrooms, I find that this is something that they do all the time. So you may notice when you walk past your languages classrooms, actually, they are repeating words and repeating them over and over again. And actually, maybe not so much mystery, but some of the words that we use within religious studies are very, very new to our pupils. And it kind of is like them learning a different language, I suppose. So even though it might feel quite strange to us, I don't think it does to the pupils, and I think it actually really, really helps them, and it helps them remember it as well. So I tend to like to add a bit of an action or something when they say it. So I'll say, you got to say mystery, because then they all look at me like I'm daft. However, I'll get them to say it over and over again. And I just find that they might come into the next lesson and they might say, Miss, we're doing a mystery again. And I go, you know what, we might be. Why did we do that last lesson? And they can absolutely recall it, and they can remember it, and they know exactly what we were talking about. So that's just another way that I tend to introduce the key terms in here. And I think, like I say, when we talk about something being a mystery and we talk about it being a mystery of faith, suddenly those questions that you get asked, well, how can he speak to himself? If he's God, it doesn't really make sense. You can use that, well, you know what, it's a mystery of faith. And then we might talk about the word faith and whether or not you need proof. Do we need to understand it as human beings, and kind of decode it in that way? So it's a way to, it sounds awful, doesn't it? A way to get them stop asking questions about the Trinity. We want them to ask questions, we want them to be curious, but bringing it back to that faith element kind of stops that absolute mind-blowing, well, it just doesn't make sense, which you sometimes get pupils that say, well, no, it doesn't make sense to me, therefore I'm not engaging with it. And I think for me, using this way kind of takes away a little bit of that for them. So if I'm going too fast, please, I'm sure Peter will stop me if anything's coming up in the chat, but please just say something. I am probably going to try and speed through this because I have done so much trying to get every little bit of the specification, and I do want time for a question and answer at the end. So I've included this because this really, really caught me out on the very first exam that we sat in this syllabus. And there was a question, a specific question on the Nicene Creed. And this is why I decided to develop this training really focusing on the specification. Because, and I get my pupils to use a specification. I show it them on PowerPoints when they're doing their revision. I get them to refer back to it. I get them to highlight it. I get them to use it as their revision checklist. Because, as I say to them, nothing can be asked that isn't in the specification on the exam. But if it's in the specification, then the exam can ask you about it. And like I said, in the very first year, there was a specific question, I think it was an explain question on the Nicene Creed. And so many of my pupils came out of that exam saying, what was the question on the Nicene Creed? We've never done about the Nicene Creed. And I said, well, no, we have. The Nicene Creed's about the Trinity. You know about the Trinity. Like, well, I didn't know that. And actually, what I realized was that we had done the Nicene Creed, but it was a kind of, as in a bit of an addition. I taught them about the Trinity. They knew about the roles of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. However, we hadn't spent a long time talking about the Nicene Creed, talking about how this was a source of wisdom and authority, and them actually knowing that phrase and knowing that that could come up in the exam. So it's absolutely not a mistake that I now make, and I am so focused on the specification when I'm teaching now. And like I said, I also get them to do that as well. So just moving on to the reading task. So when we've got quite lengthy passages like the Nicene Creed, I tend to use a type of reciprocal teaching strategy. So I find that it really kind of focuses their attention. It really gets them to pick out what they need to know, and really gets them to focus on it. And like I said, it makes the Nicene Creed a focus of that lesson as well. So really super easy. And I tend to do this for all my reading tasks from Key Stage 3 all the way up to Key Stage 4, is we just have a before, during and after. So before, I will get them, they can discuss this, they might write it down, but look at, well, what's your prior knowledge? Do you actually know what a creed is? What creeds have we maybe done in the past in Key Stage 3? Okay, well, predict, what do you think it's going to say about the Trinity? Okay, what do we already know? What have we gone through? What does a key word tell us? And then as we're going through, I'll get them to clarify. So I might get them, give them a copy each. They might highlight it, they might underline it, or if they're just following it through, if they hear a word that they don't know, they might write that down. So then we can go through those tricky words and their meanings. And then I get them to summarize it. So they will then summarize that in 5 bullet points in their book. So then they have that information. So super easy here. Obviously, I've picked it out. I've underlined words like almighty. You know, this is when we're looking at pupils who may need a bit of additional help. They may have not heard things. They probably haven't heard the word begotten before. Okay, incarnate, ascended into heaven. These are the types of words that I would expect them to pick out. What I tend to do is go through myself and do this so I know which ones they may pick out. If they haven't picked them out, I may then just say, well, do you know what this word means? If they don't, they can then write it down. So like I said, it's just a really, really good way of getting them to put their full focus on a source of wisdom and authority that is quite lengthy as well. Okay. Just again, something that I noticed as I've been teaching this is many of them will write down the Nicene Creed, which is in the Bible. Again, I just wanted to kind of point out that this is a misconception I find with my pupils all the time, and I have to really kind of tell them, no, it is not in the Bible. The Nicene Creed is a separate source of wisdom and authority, so it might be something just worth reminding pupils about. So we're still on the Trinity, and now we've got the nature and significance of each person of the Trinity. So really super simple this. We couldn't find a picture here, but normally not one that we could use in this PowerPoint, but usually all I will do is put a picture up. It might be a still from one of the films, or it might just be a cartoon picture of Jesus being baptized by John the Baptist. And I will give them that picture. I will show it on the board and do a really simple who, why, what, where, and just get them. They might discuss this in groups. They might do a think, pair, share, just to work out themselves, and most of the time they can. And through that, we then discuss as a class, well, who is it? Might show them a short clip of it, and then get them to get the information that way. Again, a bit of a misconception that the word Trinity is in the Bible. Again, this is something that I really kind of need to drum home to a lot of our pupils, that actually the word Trinity is not in the Bible, but they can use the baptism of Jesus as an example that shows the Trinity in the Bible. Again, so just your source of wisdom and authority, because again, going back to the specification focus, obviously it talks about including reference to Matthew 3:13-17. Now you can use different quotes, like I used the mystery quote in the beginning of this session, but in fact, you do need to focus on the ones that are mentioned in the specification as well. So again, I might just give them this, ask them, well, who's at the baptism? Highlight, underline, write down who's at the baptism. We would expect them to get this. Okay, so brilliant, you've got who's at the baptism. So how does this actually show the Trinity? And again, highlight each part of the Trinity in a different colour. Really, really super simple. And I'm sure it's something that a lot of you do anyway. But again, it's just really getting them to engage with those sources of wisdom and authority. And finally, when it's with the Trinity, it's how is this reflected in Christian worship and belief today? I tend to get them to work it out themselves. A lot of these topics, they're likely to have done in Key Stage 3, if not Key Stage 2. So putting up pictures like this, okay, I would just say, well, how do you think it's reflected in Christian worship and belief today? What do you already know about Christian worship and belief today? How do you think that it's expressed? And then get them to kind of develop it from there. Obviously, you can do that as discussion. You can do that as, again, think, pair, share. They can work individually on that. So I'm going to have a quick check of the chat and a sip of water. I feel like all I've done is just talk at you a lot. And then we will move on to the next. Oh, we've got an analogy of Peter Parker, Spider-Man, Clark Kent, Superman. Same thing, but separate at the same time. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think everything's fine. There doesn't seem to be too much in there. I don't know how Peter's getting on with the Q&A, but I'm happy to carry on. Okie doke. So I will carry on, and like I said, what you are going to see here is that I'm highlighting the specification focus and the parts that we are looking at. So I find that my pupils really love learning about the creation in Christianity. And it tends to be because I try and take them back to primary school because we have story time. So this is my favourite way to teach this. And it doesn't matter if they are in year 10, it doesn't matter if they are in year 11. If you turn around to them and say, today we are going to have story time, even the toughest of boys will get really, really excited, I find. So they love being read to, and this is exactly what I do. So I will read them all the Genesis stories, and I will tend to ask them to do slightly different things with each one. So Genesis 1, really simple, write down the order of creation. Genesis 2, write down the order of creation. And then how is this different? And then we'll discuss why is it different. And again, this tends to bring up some really brilliant discussion. How is this a story that moves on from Genesis 1? Well, why do you think? Why do you think it's different? What do you think Christians might say? And then Genesis 3, tend to get them to draw what they hear. You can see again on here that I've got bright sparks questions. So just trying to get them to think, why might someone's question what happens on day 1 and day 4? Then we can even look into the scientific ideas of creation and how maybe these are complementary or not. Also thinking about what they teach about animals, and also even focusing on what they teach about the roles of men and women. Depending on which specification you teach, you might find that that's something that they will then move on to further down the line. So just kind of pushing them ahead and getting them, this then becomes something that they can retrieve back to. So I do think it's one of the easiest that you can adapt to different abilities here. Using this, you can go into some brilliant debates about what it teaches about the roles of men and women in particular, I find. They tend to really enjoy that. So again, we've got now our divergent ways in which it can be understood with literal and metaphorical. So again, I will just use the Freya model here. They should know that these words from English. More than anything, I tend to get some of mine that say, well, why are we doing English in an RE lesson? So it's just trying to get them to understand that a little bit more and making sure that they know that, you know what, these words can also be used in the exam. I'm pretty sure it was either last year or the year before, it was all over Twitter about why are they asking English questions in an RE exam, and it's in the specification. We talk about it being literal, we talk about the creation story being metaphorical. So yeah, they need to know that they will show up in the exam as well. So another misconception that I find when I'm teaching this, so metaphorical means that Christians don't really believe what the Bible says is true. No. So a lot of them will say, well, some take it literally, some Christians don't really believe what it says. So it's just being really, really mindful of, obviously Christians believe that the Bible is important. Just because some take it literally, some take it as metaphorical, it doesn't kind of lessen the significance of it. So just kind of watch out for that. So now we're moving on to the word and spirit in creation. So what I'd say here is we've obviously got clear links to the previous topic of the Trinity. So I tend to print out quotes for pupils. I know that's not always, you can't always do that, depending on printer credits, etc. But I like to get them to then highlight. I like them to get to annotate all around it, giving them a few clues in the form of questions. So who are being mentioned in these passages? Oh, actually, we're looking at the Spirit of God. Have we heard that before? We're looking at the Word. Who might the Word be? What event from the Bible is this? And what does this teach Christians? Again, it's really putting the onus onto them to try and pick out the different parts and really look into these quotes and think about what they could actually mean. So yeah, that's our retrieval, which is the Trinity. And then finally, the importance of creation for Christians today, very, very similar to what I've done before. We're just giving them hints. What I find is when I get towards the end of the course, I'll often get pupils to tell me what they think Christians will say about a particular topic before I teach them anything about it, based on what they've already learnt. So it also helps them not to panic in the exam because they can make inferences, even when they can't specifically remember something. So it's, again, thinking back to, well, what have you already learned in Key Stage 3 maybe? What do we think about how we look after the world when we look at these different creation stories? How does God suggest that the world was created? Does it say on day 7 God created evil and suffering? No, it doesn't. So getting them to think about that, and again, it's getting them to do the work, which is always a good thing. So that's creation. Like I said, I personally, I think that's probably one of the easier topics on here, and one of the easier ones where you can really push pupils and stretch their ability, and also kind of bring it back a little bit so that pupils can understand it. So, incarnation. So this is another example of introducing the new concept or key term by breaking it down and working out its meaning. So I often put up a picture of chili con carne to help them remember it. So what have we got here? Okay, so in Italian, actually, carne means meat or flesh. So it just means God in flesh. So who do we think we're looking at and learning about in today's lesson? And just getting them to do that. Oh, so this is one of my favourite things to do. So I love dingbats. Absolutely love them. I was talking before about them. I have these all up around my classroom. I find pupils absolutely love trying to work these out. This is a way of putting up pictures and using these to try and get pupils to work out what the source of wisdom and authority is. It makes a really good revision activity, and I find that pupils love making their own as well. So when we're focusing on sources of wisdom and authority, I will give them a bit of time to create their own dingbats, and then we can share them and try and guess what they are, and I tend to find that they really do understand them. So I am just going to take another sip of my drink to see who can get this and who's going to put it in the chat of what we think this means. I think I can see a few people typing. So this is literally just using pictures to try and get them to work out what the quote is. So can anyone work out what the quote is here? Very close, Jodie. Yeah, it kind of is saying that. We've only got 2 guesses. I think everyone's feeling tired, probably like me, taught a full day and thinking, right, I really can't be bothered with this. Okay, so this is, if it will work, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. So that's just one way. Normally, this is the point where the pupils all go, ah, okay. So again, I think it's a little bit more of a fun way of doing it. I think when we say that in every single topic they need to know quotes, a lot of pupils can get quite worried about that, and it's just another way of really getting them to think a bit more deeply about it, and like I said, they have fun with it. They have really good fun with it. You can do this with literally anything. Yeah, so hopefully you'll enjoy that one. Okay, so now we're moving on to the last days of Jesus's life. Now, I haven't actually put anything on here, and I wanted to check that I was okay to say this. Apparently I am. So for this topic, I think it's really good to show an adaptation of the life of Jesus. So you can use whatever materials you have, but I always show the Miracle Maker. And it's from about 49 minutes into it. Now, I think this is probably something that is seen as should only really be used in primary schools. And I actually completely disagree with that, because I think it's brilliant because it's really close to the words of the Bible. So I've learned the hard way in the past, showing pupils different films to try and help them understand something, for them to then write about the film in their exam. So, for example, all I'll say is, then God kept making his beard grow back and animals kept coming to his house, is an answer that I have had when I've tried to show a certain film to help them understand the topic. So the reason that I show the Miracle Maker is, like I said, I think it's really, really close to the Bible story. So if they're going to quote something from that, then they're not going to go far wrong. So really, really simple. For my higher ability pupils, I might just write the headings out for them, get them to write the headings out. And whilst they're watching it, they will write down any notes about any of these topics. For my lower ability pupils, I tend to give them this. So we've got a few questions here that I want them to make sure they're focusing on and make sure they're answering, obviously depending on the ability of your group. You may want to stop the video, stop it every so often. But like I said, for me personally, I absolutely love using this resource. And again, it's a little bit about like story time. I find that even the toughest year 11 boys are absolutely enraptured by it. They absolutely love watching it. And I tend to show it them more because, again, I think actually it shows some really good ideas about the incarnation as well, and looking at the role of Jesus, the divine role, and also the human side of him too. So yeah, that's the way that I teach that. Okay, so moving on to salvation. So another topic that I think really benefits pupils retrieving previous learning is salvation. So you can make this as simple or as difficult as you want. You may want pupils to just write down one word. You may want them to develop their answers by explaining why the event is important. So literally start of the lesson, put these images up. These things are going to help you in this new topic. What are they? What do we already need to know about? What have we already learned that is actually going to help you in this topic? So again, we have another way here of looking at our sources of wisdom and authority. I have to thank my colleague for this next idea. So he actually developed this in his ECT year 2. And I thought it was a really good way of helping pupils analyse sources of wisdom and authority. So this is something that we've got now as kind of an outline, and we will just add different quotes in there and different questions. So again, it just gets them to really focus in on what the quote's teaching, and then they can explain it in the bottom left-hand corner. Brilliant. Now explain, well, why did Jesus have to die on the cross? And that's really using those quotes to be able to explain that. Again, you might want to include some key terms on there. For example, they may never have heard the word condemn before. And then what other topics does this link to? Okay, so again, really trying to get that retrieval, really trying to get them to think deeply about all of the topics and how they really link in with each other. So I love a bright sparks. I try and add it on majority of slides that I show to pupils, and also different handouts. So here we've got a bright sparks question just to get that deeper thinking. Again, you could kind of add more bright sparks questions. You could take some of the questions away. If it's for higher ability pupils, you could add more questions on there to try and get them to develop and understand their learning as well. Oh. Jodie seems to be sharing some brilliant things. So talking about the arrest of Barabbas, as when Barabbas goes free, it's a foreshadowing of the role of salvation given through Jesus being punished and sinful people having freedom through Christ. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Jodie. Like I said, please keep sharing. There's going to be things that I forget to mention or don't even think of mentioning, and I'm going to take everything from the chat as well, and I'm going to improve my own practice. So yeah, thank you, Jodie. And anyone else that wants to add in how they maybe teach it, how they teach it differently, absolutely. I'm only saying one way of how I do it. And like I said, lots of people have lots of brilliant ideas. So yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so now looking a bit more at the nature of salvation and the role of Christ within salvation, and also the nature and significance of atonement. So this is what I tend to do for this. So I find that this really helps them understand salvation and atonement using the information that they've already gained from the retrieval activity. So you'll notice the trees back in there. So you could just give them the questions in red and ask them to answer it using the retrieval activity and this diagram. So you might just give them this. Okay, so answer the question, explain Jesus' role in atonement and redemption. We've got what the relationship like was with God and people at creation. Then we've got what it was like at the fall. And then what do you think that's showing about the death and resurrection and the relationship between God and people there? Now, like I said, for pupils that may need a little bit of extra help, you can give them some sentence starters, you can give them some questions that will help them answer it. You can go through that and you can explain it. Okay, so again, we've got it here. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. We had a bit of a debate about whether or not that was confusing or not. So this for me is just trying to show them using pictures and using the questions and the sentence starters why the Jesus's death and resurrection was needed for a salvation and atonement, from what it was like at creation than what happened at the fall. So yeah, I find that really, really useful with my pupils. Okay, so moving on to eschatology. I've got all my notes here and I'm trying to check that I'm actually mentioning everything. So this is another retrieval activity that I think really just sets them up nicely. Now I start every single one of my lessons with a retrieval activity. We did have one way of doing it where we literally ask them, well, what did you do last lesson? What did you do a few lessons ago? What did you do last academic year? What did you do in the last topic? Things like that. I'm trying to mix it up a little bit, especially at Key Stage 4, to really make sure that it helps them with the new topic. So just reminding them of these things that they already need to know prior to them learning. And I would say something, again, it is with the benefit of time, and I do understand that, but something that we will do is, if at this point we find that, there's some real misconceptions, they're not too sure about the incarnation, they're not too sure about salvation and atonement, we might actually take a bit of a pause and go back and reteach if needs be, just to make sure those misconceptions aren't there. Because really, by this point, you want them to know all the answers to these questions. Otherwise, actually, they're going to find eschatology that little bit more difficult. Okay, so we've got our specification focus here. This time it's 39 articles of religion and also Catholic teachings. So this is what I use again. So you've seen this before. So this is really good for comparing and contrasting and just getting them to see that there are these different ideas within different branches of Christianity. Again, just remembering that this is the compare and contrast, but it's not actually comparing and contrasting just within Christianity. They could have a question asking them to compare and contrast within Christianity, but they could also get those ones where they have to compare it to the other religion that they are also studying. So again, this is really just looking at purgatory. So what do the Church of England think about purgatory? Well, actually, if we look at 39 articles of religion, it's very, very different to what the catechism tends to teach. And again, it's just that idea of breaking it down, them having it in front of them, so that they can work it out for themselves and they're doing the work. And it's not just, here's a quote, you need to learn it. And it's making sure they know how to then put it into an answer. So we've obviously got the explain question at the bottom there. So this is what I was talking about before about the Christian eschatology. Just a reminder that they may have to compare and contrast with another religion they've studied. So like I said, this is where I get them to do their poster on life after death in Christianity and in Islam. So I usually keep these. So we actually tend to teach the Islam first. So we tend to do this in the Islam section. And then I'll keep these. And when we get onto the Christianity section, I will give them back out to them. I think it's a really, really good visual representation as well. It can help them with that. They can fold it in half, they can revise it. But then also when they come to compare and contrast, they've got it there as well. So that's just a reminder about that. Okay, so we're moving on. We're getting towards 1.7 now. So I actually, even though this is at the end of this specification focus, I actually start with the examples of natural suffering and moral suffering. So you may want to show pictures, you may want to have a bit of a slideshow going through, asking them, can you put them into different sections? You might not give them this Venn diagram yet. You might just say, I'm going to show you a load of pictures. What do you see? Can you put them in any kind of categories? You may want to do it like this. I also think that this is a really, really good opportunity for a really good classroom debate about, well, why might some people say there is no natural suffering? Why might some people talk about global warming and actually it's due to that these natural disasters are happening, which actually goes back to it being moral suffering. Like I said, again, it'll all depend on your timing, but with your higher ability classes, you might want to go more into that and get them to debate that. Okay. So why does it raise a problem? So I always introduce the problem with the omnis. I'm sure everyone uses this method of how to remember them, but I thought I would just put it on there anyway. So again, I think you can really adapt the teaching of this by deciding how far you go into the arguments put forward by philosophers. With my lower ability classes, I tend to steer clear of this and just use the omnis, get them to know what they mean and have a look at why that might then cause a problem. So I actually think this topic in particular, it really helps pupils with critical thinking. Something that I find many of them do find really difficult. So many of my pupils have a faith, so they find it really, really difficult to argue the problem, and they just want to keep giving me responses about why it happens. So I find when I'm trying to teach about the problem of evil and suffering, they want to skip on to the solutions. Yeah, but it's because of this, miss. Yes, but it's because of this, miss. So I would get my higher ability, like I say, to maybe look at the philosopher Mackey and have a look at the inconsistent triad and try and get them to say, yeah, okay, but why might somebody use this as an argument? Why might someone say God doesn't exist because of this? And I tend to use an example of, okay, so if I was a Christian, I've got my Bible here, I'm maybe going through something really, really terrible, and I'm looking through my Bible and I go, oh, it says talks here about how God is all powerful, but why? If God's all powerful, why is he not getting rid of it? I'll keep reading. Okay, well, here I can see that it talks about God being omniscient. Well, if God's all knowledgeable, then well, does he not know how to get rid of it? Surely he knows, and he knows when it's going to happen. So why is he not getting rid of it? Okay, I'm going to look through here and it says God's all loving. Well, if God loves me enough, then why is he not getting rid of it? And what might that cause to that person? Really trying to get them to go into that kind of idea of, well, if that was me, what problems might it raise? What might I start questioning? And like I said, that's really, really difficult I find that's really difficult for a lot of my pupils. So it's getting them to realize that obviously there are very few, but there are some people who may lose their faith if they go through problem of evil and suffering. And we need to look at the reasons they may lose their faith before we start looking at why a lot of Christians, even if they go through problem of evil and suffering, won't lose their faith, because they will come up with solutions to it. So, solutions. The word respond absolutely baffles a lot of my pupils when this comes up. I find that they struggle with this the most. It's the word that they that find really, really difficult. And it's how do they respond to the problem of evil and suffering. So I talk about what the word respond actually means. So what do they respond? What do they say? Okay, what does the Bible say? And respond can be what they actually do. So it can be theoretical, it can be biblical, and it can also be practical. So I think sometimes as adults, we use this word and just expect pupils just to know what we mean by it. And obviously it can mean different things. So I find that this is a particular issue with pupils with EAL. So in the exam, they can be asked specifically about one way of responding. So it's really, really important that they know the difference. One of the questions this year asked specifically about a way of responding. And obviously, if a question asks you about biblical responses and they start talking about theoretical or practical responses, then they're not going to get the marks. So it's just, I would really, really make sure at this point that you really focus on the fact that they know what's different. And I tend to, in this bit, give them explain questions with specifics in using theoretical responses, biblical responses, practical responses, just so they get used to those words being used. And again, it just goes back to the idea of that in the specification focus, if it mentions it, they can be asked about it. And again, this is why I will say to them, well, when you're doing your revision, start with the specification focus, go through it. Can you talk about everything? Do you come across a word that you don't know? So if they're going through the specification focus and they go through theoretical, what's theoretical? Right, well, that's part of your revision list then, and you need to learn that and you need to know that, because that word can come up in your exam. So I'm just going to take a breath there. That is the ways that I teach it. I really hope that I have given you some practical ways and things that you can take from this. The resources are all there. You can all get a copy of this PowerPoint, and then obviously you can use this in your lessons. Hopefully they will be really, really helpful. And again, thank you to those people who have been participating in the chat, and you've offered your own ways of doing things. Please keep doing that. If you think of anything that I haven't thought of, please make sure that you put that in. That would be really, really helpful. So what I am going to move on to now is the big picture. So my plan for this slide was to show which topics can be used for retrieval for each individual topic, but they all link so well that there was just far too much. I just couldn't do it. So hopefully the retrieval activities that I have shown you throughout this will give you some good ideas. But I did want to just show you what I do use at the majority of beginning of our lessons. So this is just an example, and I tend to use this through Key Stage 3 all the way up to Key Stage 4. And this is what do you remember from last lesson, a few lessons ago? for us, because we do Islam first, trying to link it back to the Islam unit, and then what do you know from Key Stage 3? Now, what you'll notice about this is that I make it very, very specific to the topic that is being taught. So this is an example of the incarnation. Now, our pupils know this as their bell activity. They know that they come into my classroom, their other RE teachers' classrooms, and this is on the board. And they sit down, they get their books out, and they do this straight away. Like I said, I'm trying to mix it up a little bit. I've got some other ideas, like I've shown you through this presentation. But this is what they get on with. They know exactly what you're doing. You ask our pupils, what do you do as soon as you get into a religion and worldviews lesson? We do the bell activity. We do retrieval. So it's just their routine for us. So, like I said, this is an example that I do for 1.3, the incarnation. So the first two questions actually just get them to retrieve knowledge from topics 1.1, the Trinity, and 1.2, creation. So it's worth, they need to know, again, they need to know these pieces of information, not because they just need to know it for their exam. So obviously we want to use retrieval. We want to make sure that we keep throwing questions out there to keep things in the forefront of their mind. So it doesn't just go back into the memory that they go, no, we don't need this anymore. But also because they're actually really useful for this next topic that they're about to learn. So again, I'll also try and include something from Islam. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is the compare and contrast, because there isn't here, but it's worth them thinking about it. You know, they do about Isa in Islam. Oh, actually, it's kind of the same thing we're doing about that as well. And then also Key Stage 3, what have you already learned about Jesus? What do you already know? It could even be from Key Stage 2. Okay, what do you already know that Christians believe about Jesus? And it's just getting them to make sure that they have this information, and then they can use this going forwards as well. Okay, so I think I've absolutely raced through that because we have got a little bit of time left. So what I'm going to say is I'm just going to have a little bit of a breather. I know that Peter has been checking the Q&A, checking the chat as well. Again, if you do have any ideas, any that you particularly liked, let me know. Any that you think, actually, I do it this way and I think this is brilliant, so I'd like to share this, then by all means do that. There's a little bit of information that I want to give you about different resources as well in a bit, but I will just take a few moments here to hear some questions about you. Anything that I've said that you want to question, any of the resources or anything like that. So yeah, I'm going to mute myself just for a minute while I take a drink, and then I will come back and see what questions we've got. Yeah, so like Peter said, I really hope this has been useful for you. But honestly, any questions at all, ideas or experiences, please share them. I just wonder, for me, I just wondered how many people really pay close notice to the specification. Because for me, this is something that I didn't do at all when I first started teaching it. It was a case of, oh, okay, brilliant. There's textbooks there. They will tell us what we need to know. Let's just teach it. And it really, really quickly became apparent to me of how I really needed to make sure that I was really focusing on that. Oh, thank you, Shakila. So Shakila's just said for the Trinity lesson, she uses the analogy of being a mum, a daughter, and a sister. Yeah, having different roles and relationships and responsibilities, which tends to stick well with her pupils. Yeah, there's something else. Oh, they're all coming through now. Bear with me. Good, Harriet. I'm really glad that it's been useful. Jodie, again, talking about the references to Jewish law and practice throughout it, like Jesus having the Passover meal. I think you're absolutely right, Jodie. I mean, one thing that it amazes me that when we talk about actually Jesus was Jewish, why was Jesus having the Passover meal? And have it, I can stop a lesson and we can spend a whole lesson on talking about how Jesus isn't a Christian because you need to believe in Jesus to be a Christian. And again, I find it absolutely blows the minds of my pupils. And talking about the fact that the Last Supper was Jesus following the Jewish Passover. Yeah, and absolutely about how Jesus was breaking Jewish laws, and that's why the Jewish leaders at the time wanted Jesus to die. It does all tie together. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think we can definitely, if we've got time, we can definitely bring that in. And like I said before, you know, if you find that you're short on time in Key Stage 4, because I know not everybody has the benefit of having time, and it'll all depend as well. If you're at a faith school, if you're at a non-faith school, I know that there are people expected to teach this in an hour a week. I'm lucky I get 2 hours a week, but I have done 3 hours a fortnight. Yeah, so I get that. So if you don't have that time in Key Stage 4, this is something that obviously you can do in Key Stage 3. You can think about building it into your schemes of work there to make sure that they have that base knowledge, and then you can use that retrieval to take them back to it. So yeah, really, really good, really good. Yeah, you're right. A misconception. The word Trinity doesn't appear in the Bible. It's just the concept that does. Yeah, I'm glad you like the Freya model. Like I said, when getting pupils to say it out loud at first, I'm like, say mystery, and they look at me like I've gone absolutely loopy. But in the end, they all do it, and yeah, I find that it really, really helps them understand it. So yeah, thank you for finally commenting, everybody. If there's anyone else, a few people saying that it's been useful. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that it has been useful. Like I said, hopefully you can take these away. You'll have the quote sheets that on the PowerPoint that you can take away. You can print out. You can use those with your pupils. I hope, if nothing else, that everyone reads the specification and uses that. My pupils quite often will say to me, "Can I have a revision list?" And I give them the specification. As you don't need a revision list. You need to understand every single word that is on this. This is your revision list. So use this, tick it off as you know it and as you do it. Okay, so I'm going to just continue with the PowerPoint. I am going to just go through a little bit more information about resources. I should have put that one on before, shouldn't I? So these are some key Pearson GCSE documents. So firstly is the guide to the specification. It's a really fantastic resource. So I've mentioned it a lot, but it really should be the place that you go. You should be using the specification for your planning, sharing it with the pupils, like I said. Sometimes you may find that published resources do too little or too much. So they might focus on one thing too much, and then if something else comes up in the exam. So it really is, it was the first place that I would start. So there's also a links document for each specification that takes you to many more teaching and learning resources. And obviously there are lots of external sources that you can use, one being the Bible Society as well. However, they're not always endorsed by Pearson, and even if they are, the advice they print about assessment is not always endorsed. So it is worth just remembering that as well. Yeah, a few more different resources there that I've talked about as well. Got the Bible Society at the bottom there. They're really good resources. And the Pearson Edexcel website contains lots of materials which have been checked by senior examiners as well. So there's course planners there, there's exemplar material, explanation of command words, marking guidance, the definitions of useful terminology, past training events. I think this one's being recorded, so this will be there probably. Mapping when changing awarding organisations and scheme of work. So if anything changes, it is always published on there as well. There's also extra support that can be given by subject advisors as well. Okay, they are always on hand to be able to provide support as well. So you can see there's an email there. If nothing else, please scan this QR code. This will give you subject updates to your email. You will get these constantly. Really, really useful things that, you know, when you're into teaching everything and you're just going through your day to day that you might miss, you might not realize, but once you're getting those on email, they're really, really useful as well. And then you can also find out about future training events with the Pearson Professional Development Academy as well. So that is everything. I have finished early. I apologise. I think I spoke really, really fast there. I'm just going to have another look at the chat, Peter.
Yeah, I can just see there's one note in the chat from Shakila there. She asks, are there any WhatsApp groups where RS teachers can share ideas and resources? It will be great for networking.
Do you know what? I'm not actually part of any WhatsApp group where RS teachers can share ideas and resources. It might be worth someone setting one up. I think that would probably be really, really good. Obviously, there are groups on Facebook. I think it's the Respect. Yeah, Jodie's saying there's lots of Facebook groups. If you search for Respect, Jodie, I don't know if you can type in ones that are there, but they can be really supportive. The one thing that I would say is I think RE teachers are some of the most supportive teachers out there, and people will share things constantly. So yeah, absolutely. If you have got any further questions or anything, please do email teachingreligiousstudies@pearson.com. And like Peter said, those subject updates are brilliant. In fact, I will just go back to that QR code there. Please scan that and sign up. You will get all the updates that you could possibly need there. Shakila, again, I don't know if you're on the Facebook site, but maybe through that we could start a WhatsApp. There you go. Yeah. So Jodie said if you just search RE teachers into Facebook group, loads come up and there's loads of support. And there's also the Edexcel Religious Studies group on Facebook too. That is really, really good. Yeah, fantastic. Peter Baldeep's just asked if it's possible to have similar sessions for Hinduism and Sikhism. I'm not too sure about that. I think you might know.
Yeah, it's something we're looking into at the moment, Baldeep. So I've actually recently been chatting to the Nishcam schools. So we're kind of going to be looking towards to collaborate with those regarding Sikhism, and obviously our other religions as well. We're looking to see if we can add additional support going forwards as well. So please keep an eye out. And as I say, or as Jenny's been kind of recommending, really sign up to those subject updates, because you'll be the first to know of any of these new resources as they become available.
Brilliant. Yeah, obviously, I have finished 10 minutes early. I am going to stick around if anybody does have any more questions that they want to put into the chat, or any other ideas that they want to share. But just thank you so much for attending, especially after many of you have probably had a really busy day at work. And I really hope it was useful. And thank you for your comments and if you said that it was useful.